The sky turned dark at noon. Ki-hoon looked up from his microscope and saw shadows spreading across the windows of his laboratory. At first, he thought clouds were blocking the sun. Then he heard the screams from outside. Massive ships floated above Seoul, each one bigger than a city block. They were made of something that looked like purple crystal, glowing with strange light. More ships appeared over Tokyo, Beijing, New York, London, and every major city on Earth. Within an hour, the entire planet knew they were not alone in the universe. Ki-hoon ran to the window. People filled the streets below, pointing up at the alien vessels. Cars stopped in the middle of roads. Everything went silent except for the hum coming from the ships above. It was a sound that made his teeth hurt and his head feel heavy. The aliens called themselves the Veltrons. They sent a message to every screen, every phone, every device on Earth. A tall creature appeared, its skin like smooth stone, its eyes glowing yellow. It spoke in perfect English, and somehow everyone heard it in their own language. "We are the Velthron Empire. We have brought order to 847 worlds. Now we bring order to yours. Do not resist. Resistance brings only pain. Compliance brings peace. You have 72 hours to accept our guidance." Across the city, Hana sat in a dark room filled with computers. She worked for military intelligence, and right now every screen showed the same thing: chaos. Armies around the world were mobilizing. Fighter jets took off. Missiles launched. She watched as human weapons struck the alien ships and did absolutely nothing. The Velthrons didn't even bother to fight back. They just waited. After 24 hours, strange devices fell from the ships. They looked like small pyramids made of black metal. They landed in city centers, in towns, even in villages. When they touched the ground, they started to glow. Hana felt it immediately. A pressure in her head. A voice that wasn't really a voice, telling her to stay calm, to accept, to obey. She shook her head hard. The feeling faded a bit, but it didn't go away completely. Around her, some of her co-workers stopped what they were doing. They sat down and stared at nothing. Their eyes looked empty. Ki-hoon experienced the same thing in his lab. The pressure came like a wave. He grabbed his desk to steady himself. Two of his assistants collapsed. When they stood up again, they walked out of the lab without saying a word. They moved like puppets on strings. By the end of the second day, half the world seemed to be under control. People stopped resisting. They stopped running. They just waited for instructions from the devices scattered across the planet. Governments tried to destroy the pyramids, but they were protected by invisible shields. Nothing could touch them. Junho had been a soldier before he became a security consultant. When the pyramids started controlling people, he gathered anyone who seemed to still have their own mind. He found about 20 people in his neighborhood who could still think clearly. They hid in a basement, trying to figure out what to do. "Why aren't we controlled like the others?" a young woman asked. Junho didn't have an answer. He felt the pressure too, but somehow he could push it away. It took effort, though. Constant effort, like fighting against a strong wind that never stopped blowing. On the third day, Yuna was running tests on one of the pyramids from a safe distance. She was a physicist, and she knew these devices were using some kind of quantum signal. The readings on her instruments made no sense according to Earth science. The signal was reaching into people's brains and rewriting their thoughts. But something strange was happening. The signal wasn't working the same way on everyone. Some people fell under control immediately. Others fought it for hours. A few seemed almost immune. Yuna started taking notes. There had to be a pattern. The Velthrans sent another message on the third day. "Your resistance is ending. Those who still fight will be brought into compliance. There is no escape. There is no hope. There is only order." More pyramids fell from the sky. The pressure in everyone's head grew stronger. Ki-hoon felt like his skull was being squeezed. He locked himself in his lab and tried to focus on his research. His hands shook as he looked at brain scans from before the invasion. There had to be something in the human brain that could fight this. Hana kept working even as more of her co-workers went blank and walked away. She hacked into communications networks, looking for anyone else who was still free. She found scattered pockets of resistance, people hiding, people fighting the pressure in their heads. She started building a network, connecting them through encrypted channels. The 72 hours ended. The Velthrans landed their first troops on Earth. They were tall, strong, and carried weapons that could vaporize a tank. They didn't come to fight, though. They came to organize. They started assigning controlled humans to work crews, mining, building, manufacturing. Earth was becoming a factory for the Velthron Empire. But in basements, in hidden labs, in underground bunkers, some humans remained free. Ki-hoon, Hana, Junho, and Yuna didn't know each other yet. They were scattered across Korea, each one working alone. Each one refusing to give up. Each one noticing something the Velthrans hadn't seen. The control wasn't perfect, and the human brain was doing something unexpected. Something the Velthrans had never encountered in their 847 conquered worlds. It was learning. 2 weeks passed since the Velthrons took control of Earth. Ki-hoon barely slept. He spent every hour studying brain scans, comparing data, looking for answers. His lab was one of the few places still running on emergency power. The Velthrons didn't seem to care about research facilities as long as they stayed quiet. He made his breakthrough at 3 in the morning. The brain scan on his screen showed something incredible. A woman had been exposed to the control pyramids 5 times. Each time, her brain showed less response to the signal. It was like her neurons were building walls against the invasion. Her brain was adapting. Ki-hoon's hands trembled as he pulled up more scans. The pattern was everywhere. People who fought the control and survived became stronger against it. The human brain wasn't just resisting. It was evolving in real time, learning to block the Velthron frequency. He had to share this information. But how? The Velthrons monitored all normal communications. Then he remembered the old internet protocols, the ones from before social media and cloud services. Deep web networks that most people forgot existed. He encrypted his research and sent it out into the darkness, hoping someone would find it. Hana found it 6 hours later. She was scanning underground networks for any useful intelligence when Ki-hoon's data appeared. She read it 3 times to make sure she understood. Then she smiled for the first time in 2 weeks. This was a weapon. Not a gun or a bomb, but something better. Information. She reached out through her network of free humans. Thousands of people were still hiding, still fighting the pressure in their heads. She sent them instructions. Expose yourself to the pyramids for short periods. Let the signal touch your mind. Then pull back. Train your brain like training a muscle. Build resistance. It sounded crazy, but people were desperate. They tried it, and it worked. After a few days of controlled exposure, people could walk right past the pyramids without feeling the pressure. They could fake being controlled while their minds stayed free. Junho got Hana's message through a contact in the resistance. He gathered his group of survivors and started the training program. It was painful. Every exposure to the pyramids felt like needles in the brain. Some people couldn't handle it and had to stop. But those who pushed through became immune. Junho saw the potential immediately. If they could fake being controlled, they could move freely. They could spy on the Velthrons. They could sabotage operations from the inside. He started recruiting people who had completed the resistance training, building a network of fake slaves who were actually free. Meanwhile, Yuna had different problems. She had managed to capture one of the small pyramids by using a Faraday cage and quantum dampeners. Now it sat in her makeshift lab, still glowing, still transmitting. She studied its signals day and night. What she discovered terrified and excited her at the same time. The pyramid wasn't just a control device, it was a transmitter in a galaxy-wide network. Every pyramid on Earth was connected to pyramids on 847 other worlds. They all reported back to a central command somewhere in deep space. The Velthrons were using quantum entanglement for instant communication across any distance. But there was a flaw. The network assumed all signals were legitimate. It had no security, no verification. Why would it? The Velthrons had used this system for thousands of years without a problem. No conquered species had ever been able to access it. Una started testing. She sent tiny signals through the captured pyramid, watching to see if anyone noticed. Nothing happened. The network accepted her signals like they were normal. She could inject false data into the system, and the Velthrons would believe it was real. She encrypted her findings and sent them to Hana's network. Within days, the four of them were in contact. Ki-hoon the scientist, Hana the hacker, Junho the soldier, and Una the physicist. They had never met in person, but they became the core of something bigger. A plan that could change everything. Hana proposed the strategy. We don't fight them head-on. We make them think they've won. We feed them false information. We act like perfect slaves while we prepare. Ki-hoon agreed. My research shows we can train thousands, maybe millions of people to resist the control. But we have to be patient. If the Velthrons suspect anything, they'll change their tactics. Junho added his tactical expertise. We need people in key positions. Mines, factories, construction sites, anywhere the Velthrons are building or extracting resources. We put our trained people there, acting controlled, but actually gathering intelligence. Una had the most dangerous job. I'll work on cracking their communication network completely. If we can read their messages, we'll know what they're planning. If we can send our own messages, we can manipulate them. The plan was insane. It required thousands of people to lie perfectly for months, maybe years. It required patience when every instinct screamed to fight. It required trust in strangers across a broken world. But it was the only plan that had a chance of working. Over the next month, the resistance grew in secret. Ki-hoon's training program spread through underground networks. People practiced resisting the control signal, building their mental defenses. The success rate was about 60%. Not everyone could do it, but 60% of millions was still a huge number. Hana coordinated the information network. She connected resistance cells across the world, sharing intelligence and strategies. She created false identities for trained resistors, helping them get jobs in Velthron operations. Junho recruited and organized. He built teams of people who could act controlled during the day and meet in secret at night. He taught them how to sabotage equipment without getting caught, how to delay production without seeming to resist. Una cracked deeper into the Velthron network. She learned their language, their protocols, their reporting systems. She started sending false reports through the pyramids, tiny lies mixed with truth. The Velthrons never questioned them. 3 months after the invasion, the Velthrons sent a report to their high command. Earth was 87% compliant. Minor resistance remained, but was being eliminated. Resource extraction was ahead of schedule. Human workers were efficient and obedient. Every word was a lie, but the Velthrons believed it completely. Why wouldn't they? This was what always happened. This was how their empire worked. They had no idea that the humans were watching, learning, and preparing. They had no idea that their greatest strength had become their greatest weakness. The long game had begun. 6 months after the invasion, Earth looked like a conquered world. Humans worked in massive mining operations, digging rare metals from the ground. They built structures for the Velthrons, following instructions without question. They manufactured components for alien technology in factories that ran day and night. To any observer, Earth was just another slave world in the Velthron Empire. But appearances were deceiving. Ki-hoon walked through the Seoul research facility with his head down and his eyes blank. He wore the expression of a controlled human perfectly. Around him, other workers moved like robots, assembling quantum processors for Velthron ships. A Velthron supervisor watched from a platform above, its yellow eyes scanning for any signs of resistance. What the supervisor didn't know was that 80% of the workers in this facility were free. They had all gone through Ki-hoon's resistance training. They acted controlled during the day and met in secret at night. And instead of building processors correctly, they were introducing tiny flaws so small the Velthrons wouldn't notice until the processors failed months later, far from Earth. In another part of the city, Hana sat in a communications center that the Velthrons had built to coordinate their occupation. She appeared to be a simple data entry worker, logging reports from across the planet. Her fingers moved mechanically across the keyboard, her face showing no emotion. But every report she entered was carefully edited. She changed numbers, modified locations, and altered timelines. When Velthron commanders asked for resource surveys, she sent them to remote areas with nothing valuable. When they requested security reports, she invented resistance cells in places far from the real resistance. The Velthrons chased ghosts, while the real resistance grew stronger. She had also cracked their internal communication system completely. She could read every message the Velthrons sent to each other. She knew their schedules, their supply lines, their troop movements. She knew which commanders were lazy and which ones were paranoid. She knew everything and they had no idea. Junho's role was the most dangerous. He worked in a weapons depot, one of the places where Velthrons stored their advanced technology. As a controlled human, he was trusted to move equipment and maintain systems. The Velthrons never imagined a slave would betray them. Every night, Junho and his team studied the weapons. They learned how Velthron shields worked, how their energy weapons functioned, how their armor was designed. They took detailed scans and measurements, then shared the information with resistance scientists across the world. They also began stealing, small amounts at first. A power cell here, a targeting module there. Nothing that would be noticed immediately. They hid the stolen technology in secret locations across the city. Slowly, carefully, they were building an arsenal. Yuna had made the most progress. She didn't just read Velthron communications anymore. She could send them. She could inject false data into their network and make it look completely legitimate. The quantum entanglement system that connected all 848 conquered worlds was now her playground. She created false reports about Earth's productivity. According to her data, Earth was producing 30% more resources than it actually was. This made the Velthron commanders happy. It made them trust their occupation force. It made them think Earth was their most successful conquest ever. But the real masterpiece was the resistance reports. Yuna created fake intelligence about a growing resistance movement on the other side of the planet. She made it seem serious enough to require attention, but not serious enough to request backup from the Empire. The Velthrons moved troops away from the real resistance to chase this phantom threat. The four of them met in person for the first time 7 months after the invasion. It was risky, but necessary. They gathered in an abandoned subway tunnel deep under Seoul, along with representatives from resistance cells around the world. The Velthrons trust the data they're receiving, Yuna reported. They have no reason to doubt it. As far as they know, Earth is performing exactly as expected. Hana pulled up a holographic map. We've identified every Velthron installation on the planet. We know where they store weapons, where they keep ships, where their commanders sleep. We have people in 90% of these locations. Junho added, My teams have stolen enough technology to arm about 5,000 fighters. We've also learned the weak points in their shields and armor. Their technology is advanced, but it's predictable. They haven't changed their tactics in thousands of years. Ki-hoon showed brain scan data. We've successfully trained about 400 million people worldwide to resist the control signal. That's more than we hoped for, and we can hide them all by having them act controlled during the day. One of the resistance leaders asked the critical question. When do we strike? Not yet, Hana said firmly. "The Velthrans still have too many ships in orbit. We need to thin out their forces first." Yuna smiled. "I have an idea about that." Over the next 2 months, Yuna crafted the perfect lie. She sent reports through the Velthron network about resource discoveries on 3 nearby star systems. Rich worlds, easy to conquer, full of valuable minerals. The reports came from multiple sources, all fake, all perfectly coordinated. To the Velthron High Command, it looked like their Earth garrison had found a golden opportunity. The Velthrons took the bait. They saw Earth as secure and productive. They saw new worlds ready for conquest. They made the obvious decision. They would keep a garrison force on Earth and send the majority of their fleet to conquer the 3 new systems. Hana watched the troop movements through intercepted communications. 60% of the Velthron fleet prepared to leave orbit. 60% of their ground forces boarded transports. They were stripping Earth of protection to chase a lie. The resistance leaders wanted to attack immediately when the fleet left. Junho had to hold them back. "Not yet. We wait until the fleet is too far away to return quickly. We wait until the remaining Velthrons feel comfortable and safe. Then we hit them with everything at once." It took incredible discipline. Hundreds of millions of people, all pretending to be slaves, all waiting for the signal to strike. Some people broke under the pressure and attacked too early. The Velthrons crushed these small uprisings easily, which actually helped the deception. It made the Velthrons think the real resistance was weak and disorganized. 10 months after the invasion, the Velthron fleet departed for the fake systems. They left behind 40% of their original forces. The Velthron commander on Earth sent a confident report to High Command. "Earth is secure. Human workforce is productive and compliant. No significant resistance activity. Recommend this world as a regional administrative hub." In her hidden lab, Yuna read that message and smiled. The Velthrons had just declared Earth secure. They had lowered their guard completely. They believed their own propaganda. Ki-hoon, Hana, Junho, and Yuna met one final time before the attack. They looked at each other with exhaustion and determination. They had spent 10 months lying, hiding, and preparing. They had built an army in plain sight. They had turned the Velthron's greatest weapon against them. "Tomorrow?" Junho asked. Hana nodded. "Tomorrow." The word spread through encrypted channels across the globe. 400 million free humans received the same message. 10 months of pretending to be slaves was about to end. 10 months of gathering intelligence, stealing weapons, and learning enemy tactics was about to pay off. The Velthrons went to sleep thinking Earth was theirs. They would wake up to discover they had made a terrible mistake. They would learn that humans were very good at pretending, and they were even better at fighting back. The attack began at dawn across every time zone simultaneously. 400 million humans stopped pretending and started fighting. In Seoul, Junho led his team into the weapons depot where he had worked for 10 months. The Velthron guards barely had time to react. They reached for their weapons, but Junho's people already knew exactly how those weapons worked. They knew the quarter-second delay when a Velthron energy rifle powered up. They knew the shields didn't cover the neck joint in the armor. They knew everything because they had been watching and learning for months. The depot fell in 8 minutes. Junho's team grabbed every weapon they could carry and disappeared into the tunnels beneath the city. Other teams hit other depots at the exact same moment. Across the planet, resistance fighters were arming themselves with Velthron technology. Hana sat in the communications center with her hands flying across the keyboard. She didn't look like a controlled worker anymore. Her eyes were sharp and focused. Around her, the other workers had dropped their blank expressions and were executing her instructions precisely. She launched the virus that Yuna had designed. It spread through the Velthron communication network like fire through dry grass. Control pyramids across the planet began receiving conflicting signals. Some shut down completely. Others started broadcasting random noise. The ones that kept working were sending false data back to Velthron commanders. A Velthron supervisor burst into the room, its energy weapon raised. Hana didn't even look up. One of her team members shot it with a stolen rifle before it could fire. The supervisor's shield flickered but didn't activate. Yuna had sent a disable code through the network 3 seconds earlier. The shields were offline. Yuna's lab was chaos but controlled chaos. She had 20 people helping her now, all feeding instructions into the Velthron network. They were sending shutdown codes, false alarm signals, and fake emergency reports. Velthron commanders across Earth were receiving messages that contradicted each other. Some said there was a minor uprising in one city. Others said there was a full rebellion across the planet. The Velthrons didn't know what to believe. Then Yuna activated her masterpiece, the feedback loop. Every control pyramid was designed to send signals into human brains. But Yuna had figured out how to reverse the signal. Now the pyramids were receiving signals from her lab and amplifying them. The quantum network that connected all the pyramids became a weapon. She sent a pulse through the entire network. Every Velthron on Earth felt it at the same moment. A wave of disorientation that lasted only 3 seconds, but 3 seconds was enough. 3 seconds of confusion in the middle of a battle was fatal. Ki-hoon wasn't fighting. His job was different but just as important. He was broadcasting the neural counterfrequency that he had discovered months ago. Any human who still had traces of Velthron control in their mind felt that control break apart. Millions of people who had been partially controlled suddenly became completely free. The Velthron workforce disappeared in an instant. The fighting was brutal but one-sided. The humans had every advantage. They knew the Velthron tactics because they had watched them for months. They knew the weak points in Velthron technology because they had studied it every day. They knew where every Velthron soldier was positioned because Hana had tracked them through the communication network. Most importantly, the humans were fighting for their home. The Velthrons were just following orders from commanders who were receiving false information and couldn't coordinate a proper response. In the skies above major cities, Velthron ships tried to take off. Some made it off the ground before human teams hit them with stolen weapons. The ship's shields were offline, and their pilots were disoriented from Yuna's pulse. They crashed back to Earth or exploded in midair. Junho's team fought their way to a landing pad where 3 Velthron warships sat ready for departure. These were smaller ships, but still powerful enough to destroy a city. Velthron pilots were running toward them, trying to escape the chaos on the ground. "Take them alive if you can!" Junho shouted to his team. "We need pilots who know how to fly these things." His team moved with precision. They had trained for this moment, practiced the tactics 1,000 times in secret. They stunned the Velthron pilots with their own weapons and secured the ships. Within an hour, human technicians were studying the controls, learning how to fly alien spacecraft. Similar scenes played out across the planet. Resistance teams captured ships, weapons depots, and communication arrays. The Velthrons tried to mount a defense, but their command structure was falling apart. Commanders couldn't communicate with each other. Soldiers didn't know where to go or what to do. The control network that had conquered 847 worlds was now their worst enemy. By sunset on the first day, the battle was essentially over. Pockets of Velthron resistance remained, but they were isolated and surrounded. The Velthrons who survived started surrendering. They had never experienced anything like this. In their entire history, no conquered species had ever fought back successfully. Hana finally left the communication center when she was sure the network was secure. She had been working for 16 hours straight. Her hands were shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline. She met Junho outside a captured Velthron command post. "How many did we lose?" she asked. "About 80,000 worldwide," Junho said quietly. "It could have been much worse." It was a terrible number, but Hana knew he was right. If they had fought the Velthrons 10 months ago when the invasion first happened, millions would have died, and they still would have lost. Patience had saved lives. Yuna and Ki-hoon arrived together, both looking exhausted. They had been working non-stop since the attack began. "The network is ours," Yuna reported. "Every control pyramid on Earth is under our command now. We can use them or destroy them." "Don't destroy them," Hana said immediately. "We're going to need them." The others looked at her with questions in their eyes. She pulled up a holographic display showing the Velthron Empire. 848 worlds, all connected by the same network they had just captured. "The Velthrons who left Earth are still out there," Hana said. "They think Earth is still secure because that's what their network is telling them. We've been sending fake reports all day saying the uprising was minor and contained." Ki-hoon understood first. "You want to keep lying to them?" "More than that," Hana said with a tired smile. "I want to use their own network to destroy their entire empire." Junho laughed, a sound of disbelief and admiration. "You want to teach the other conquered worlds how to resist." "Exactly," Yuna said, catching on to the plan. "We have access to every world in their empire through this network. We can send them the resistance training, the shield disable codes, the weapon weaknesses, everything we learned." They stood in silence for a moment, looking at the holographic display of the Velthron Empire. An empire that had ruled for thousands of years. An empire that was about to discover that humans were very good teachers. "How long do we have before the fleet returns?" Ki-hoon asked. 3 months, maybe 4, Hana said. "They're chasing the fake systems we invented. When they find nothing there, they'll turn around." "Then we have 3 months to prepare," Junho said. 3 months to turn this planet into a fortress. 3 months to learn how to fly their ships and use their weapons properly. And 3 months to start a galaxy-wide revolution, Yuna added. The 4 of them looked at each other. 10 months ago, they had been strangers hiding from an alien invasion. Now they were leaders of a rebellion that had just won its first battle, but the war wasn't over. It was just beginning. And this time, humanity wasn't going to wait to be conquered. They were going to teach the galaxy how to fight back. 3 months passed in a blur of activity. Earth transformed from a conquered world into something the Velthrons had never imagined, a planet preparing for war. Junho stood on the bridge of a captured Velthron warship, now crewed entirely by humans. His team had learned to fly it by studying the controls and reading the instruction files in the ship's computer. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. Across Earth's orbit, 50 more captured ships floated in formation, all crewed by humans who had learned to operate alien technology through trial and error. On the ground, factories that once produced components for the Velthrons now made weapons for humans. Ki-hoon had organized teams of scientists to reverse engineer every piece of Velthron technology they had captured. The humans couldn't build ships as advanced as the Velthrons, but they could modify them. They could improve them. They could make them better. Hana's work was the most critical. For 3 months, she had been sending carefully crafted messages through the Velthron network. To the commanders on the 60% of the fleet chasing the fake systems, everything seemed normal. Earth was productive. The garrison was secure. There were no problems. But to the other 847 conquered worlds, Hana was sending a different message. It started with simple data packets hidden inside routine communications, instructions on how to resist the control signals, explanations of the weaknesses in Velthron technology. Evidence that resistance was possible. Yuna tracked the responses. At first, there was nothing. Then small signs appeared, production rates dropping on distant worlds, control pyramids malfunctioning, minor uprisings that were quickly crushed. The other conquered species were learning. They were trying. Some were failing, but some were succeeding. "We're getting organized responses from 17 worlds now," Yuna reported during one of their regular meetings. "They've formed resistance movements and they're asking for more detailed instructions." "Send them everything," Hana said. Battle tactics, technology weaknesses, communication protocols make them part of the network. Ki-hoon had been working on a different problem. The Velthrons will eventually figure out what we're doing. When they do, they'll change their tactics. We need to move faster. The fleet will be back in 3 weeks, Junho said. Our scouts detected them turning around 2 days ago. They found the fake systems empty, and now they're coming home. Perfect, Hana said, and the others looked at her in surprise. We want them to come back. We've been preparing for this. The plan was insane, but everything about the human resistance had been insane from the start. Instead of running or hiding when the Velthron fleet returned, the humans were going to fight. But not the way the Velthrons expected. When the fleet arrived at Earth, they found a seemingly normal scene. The planet looked controlled. Cities were functioning. Factories were producing. Control pyramids glowed across the surface. Everything appeared exactly as they had left it. The fleet commander sent a message to the garrison. Report status. Hana, sitting in the captured communication center, sent a response using the garrison commander's access codes. All secure. Minor uprisings were eliminated. Production exceeds targets. Welcome home. The fleet entered orbit, their shields down because there was no perceived threat. Why would they raise shields over their own conquered world? The first wave of ships began landing procedures at designated bases. That's when Junho gave the signal. 50 captured Velthron warships suddenly activated their weapons. They had been floating in orbit for weeks, looking like part of the normal defense grid. The Velthron fleet had scanned them when they arrived, but saw nothing wrong. The ships transmitted the correct identification codes. They were in the right positions. They seemed normal, but they weren't crewed by Velthrons anymore. The attack was devastating. Half the landing ships were destroyed before they realized what was happening. The fleet commander tried to activate shields, but Yuna had already sent disable codes through the network. The shields flickered and failed. On the ground, what the Velthrons thought was a controlled workforce suddenly attacked every Velthron installation simultaneously. Weapons depots, command centers, landing pads, all hit at the same moment by humans who had been pretending to be slaves. The orbital battle was chaos. The human crews were less skilled than Velthron pilots, but they didn't need to be skilled. They knew exactly where to shoot because Ki-hoon's teams had studied Velthron ship designs for months. They knew the weak points in the hull. They knew the blind spots in the sensors. They knew which systems failed first when damaged. More importantly, the humans were willing to take risks that Velthran commanders would never consider. Ships piloted by humans rammed into Velthron vessels, sacrificing themselves to take out larger targets. Damaged human ships didn't retreat. They pushed forward until they were destroyed or victorious. The Velthron fleet commander finally understood what was happening. Earth hadn't been conquered. The humans had been pretending. Everything had been a lie. He tried to send a warning to the Velthron High Command, but his communications were jammed. Hana had control of the entire network. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Velthron fleet was destroyed. Some ships managed to escape into deep space, but most were captured or destroyed. Thousands of Velthron soldiers surrendered, stunned by their defeat. Junho stood on the bridge of his ship, looking at the debris field that now orbited Earth. They had won, but at a cost. 20 of the 50 human-crewed ships were destroyed. Thousands of human fighters had died. The victory was real, but it wasn't clean. Hana gathered the other leaders in the communication center. She pulled up the galactic display showing all 848 conquered worlds. We need to move fast. The Velthrons still have fleets at their core worlds. They'll come for us once they realize what happened. Let them come, Yuna said. We'll be ready, and we won't be alone. She activated the communication network. Messages were flooding in from the other conquered worlds. 32 planets had successfully resisted Velthran control. 40 more were in active rebellion. The rest were watching and learning. Ki-hoon pulled up analysis data. The Velthron Empire is falling apart. They built everything on the assumption that control was permanent. They never prepared for rebellion. Their entire command structure is based on the network, and we control the network now. We should send delegations to the free worlds, Junho suggested. Share technology, coordinate defenses, build an alliance. Over the next weeks, Earth became the center of something new. Ships traveled to the rebellious worlds, carrying not weapons but information. Humans taught other species how to resist, how to fight, how to be free. Some species learned faster than others. Some had natural resistance to the control signals like humans did. Others needed more help. The Velthran Empire sent fleets to crush the rebellions, but they were fighting on too many fronts. Every world they attacked, 3 more rose up. The control network that had built their empire was now spreading the disease of freedom. They tried to shut down the network, but Yuna had locked them out of their own system. 1 year after the initial invasion of Earth, the Velthron Empire collapsed completely. Their core worlds were isolated, surrounded by former slave worlds that now had their own fleets, their own weapons, their own freedom. Some Velthrons surrendered. Others fled into deep space. A few tried to negotiate peace. Ki-hoon stood in what had been a Velthron command center, now converted into a human research facility. He was analyzing data from all the freed worlds. "We were lucky," he said to Hana, who had come to check his progress. "The human brain's unusual adaptability made us resistant to control. Other species didn't have that advantage." "But they learned from us," Hana replied. "That's what makes us dangerous. We don't just survive. We share what we learn. We turn individual strength into collective power." Junho entered the room, fresh from a meeting with representatives from 20 different species. They want to form a council, a coalition of free worlds. They want Earth to lead it. "We're not conquerors," Yuna said, joining the conversation. "We just wanted to be free." "Exactly," Junho said. "That's why they trust us. We didn't defeat the Velthrons to build our own empire. We did it to end empires." The 4 of them stood together, looking at a map of the galaxy. A year ago, it had been dominated by the Velthron Empire, marked in purple. Now it was a patchwork of colors, each representing a free world choosing its own path. "They thought we were easy to control," Ki-hoon said quietly. "They thought control was enough," Hana added. "They never imagined we could learn," Yuna continued. Junho finished the thought. "They never imagined we could teach." The galaxy was different now. Humans had proven that control could be resisted, that empires could fall, that freedom was possible. Other species would remember that lesson. Some would use it to build something better. Others might try to become new empires, and the humans would have to watch for that. But for now, Earth and its allies stood together. Not as conquerors, but as survivors who had learned the most important lesson of all. The strength to resist tyranny came not from weapons or technology, but from the refusal to give up, the patience to prepare, and the wisdom to share what they learned with others. The age of the Velthron Empire was over. The age of human ingenuity and the freedom it could teach to the galaxy had just begun.